Aloha, and welcome to the final part of the MarlinBill Kingdom series. So in this video I'm going to be finishing up the sword. Now due to the size of the sword, the MarlinBill, it's going to kind of turn out to be more of a short sword. Not a big deal. Turned out really nice. I was actually very pleased with it. You'll notice that the handle is a little bit hefty. Um, the main reason for that was just weight. The MarlinBills, especially once I fill them, get pretty heavy. And so I wanted to take the handle down a little bit more, but it was just, even after removing um, everything with the shaping and sanding and everything down, the weight was still just barely balanced. So right where it goes from the handle to the bill, it was right where the balance point was, so I didn't want to take out too much more than that. Due to the size and shape, I ended up needing to take out quite a bit of the handle, the meat of the handle, with a rasp and just a regular hand sanding. Normally I would take this down with my power tools using the disc sander. I couldn't really get a good angle for it, and so I'm just taking this one down by hand. One of the nice things though about taking it down by hand is I'm able to get a little bit cleaner edges before I start sanding. So oftentimes when I do my sanding is when I put in most of the edge work, but because of the rasp, I didn't have to spend as much time putting in that edge work. I was able to get a lot of that in there just via the rasp. That worked out well. One thing that's really cool is you can actually already see it. You see the lines, the grain on this piece of koa is just really pretty. I just love watching the different pieces come out. Really beautiful wood, especially the curly koa. Just looks really amazing. So I have most of that taken down. I started bringing in the edge here, so you can kind of already see it. I wanted the end of the sword to not be flush with the handle, so I wanted to have that step down and then go to that diamond shape. And so I started cleaning that edge up, and then what I ended up needing to do, just because I wanted to make sure that it was a really clean edge work, was I used my chisel to really fine tune that and make it look a lot more crisp. The Here I'm just using, I think I'm using a half-inch chisel is what I'm using here. For no particular reason. I just first chisel I grabbed on the wall. I could have used probably the 1 inch and it would have gone a little bit faster. Not really doing too much fine edge work on here. Really just cleaning up that one section. So the overall design for this sword was actually requested based off of one of my older pieces that has a similar design. And so on the hilt, the reason why the hilt sticks out so far is I'm going to be putting teeth on that hilt. Otherwise, for a MarlinBill, I'd normally do something a little bit more cylindrical, just to kind of accent the size of the bill. But they specifically wanted to have kind of that guard with the teeth coming out. And so that's why you see the hilt kind of widening up and then coming back in again on the handle. And then the end of it I have there just because I wanted it to have that diamond shape towards the end. I thought it would look nice and accent the rest of the piece pretty well. One of the things that I noticed as I was going through, and you can kind of see it here, is it has a crack in it. There's a, well, it wasn't a crack. It was more of like a knot. And so I noticed that as I was sanding down. I was trying to sand past it, but it just wasn't working. And so what I ended up needing to do is fill that with epoxy. I noticed as I was sanding some other sections here that I wanted to clean up as well. I ended up taking just a metal file and then I wrap it in sandpaper. I do that quite often, actually. It's a really nice way of getting sanding in a good clean edge. Once I got that cleaned up, I came back over to this section here where that little knot was, and all I'm doing here is just filling that with epoxy. I mix this epoxy with sawdust. I do that frequently, especially when I epoxy wood. I try to take the sawdust from that piece itself, just because it mixes, the colors mix better. But I'm filling this in for a couple reasons. One, because that hole will leave a weak spot, and two, I'm going to end up needing drilling into this when I put in the holes for lashing in the teeth. So I just wanted to make sure that, that I wouldn't break off a big section of the wood due to a crack, or, that hole is going through there. So once that's set, I just sanded it off, and the next step here is I'm just going to be putting in the grooves. So I have 2 grooves on either side of the hilt. I'm going to end up using bull shark teeth for those, 1-inch bull shark teeth, and then 2 grooves on either side of the bill. The teeth I'll use for the bill will probably be tiger shark, just because of the barbs. I just like how they'll accent the bill for that. Putting in the grooves, I use my Dremel. If you've seen any of my other videos, I use the same Dremel for all of those. It's just a tungsten carbide bit, and I just slowly work it through and get it to a good depth depending on the size of tooth that I'm going to use. The first step here is I'm going to be setting the teeth with some epoxy. I do that every time just to make it a little bit easier to work with. In the wood, I'll mix the epoxy with wood shavings, with sawdust, which is why it's darker. And then with the bill, I'll mix in, or I won't mix in anything. I'll just put it in as a clear epoxy just because I think it looks better with the bill. Tapping in the teeth went great, but I actually made, oh man, I still can't believe this happened. So after and you can see right there, broke off the tooth. After I tap the teeth, the next thing that I do is I clean off all of the overspill epoxy. That's what all that fine white powder is. And as I was doing that, my Dremel caught a tooth and just ripped it in half. Oh, I still can't believe I did that. I was so irritated. Rather than trying to fix it right away, I just went back to what I was doing. So this is how I ended up breaking it. I was cleaning off the overspill epoxy from when I set the bill, and I was also cleaning off the overspill epoxy from setting the teeth. So I was just trying to figure out if I wanted to fix it first, if I wanted to come back to it. I couldn't quite decide. What I ended up doing is I just went through and I drilled all of the holes for where the lashing is going to be, and then after that I came back and fixed that tooth. And so that's this first step here, just drilling in those holes. What I do is I make, especially on that line, longer section, I make a top hole and a bottom hole, and then I use any straight piece. Usually I use this file, but that just keeps my holes in line, and then I mark them in between the teeth. I do that just to keep that line center. Otherwise it looks kind of weird when you're looking at it from a distance. The bit I used for this one was a little bit larger. Usually I make the holes a little bit smaller, but because it's going to have a 4-ply, each lashing is going to go through it 4 times. I use that. And then I used a little bit smaller drill bit for this part, just because it's only going to have 2-ply. And you'll see what I mean by that when I go to lash it. It'll make like a triangle shape. So this actually, I wasn't going to include this, but I thought I would. This is how I repair a tooth. So whenever I've repaired a couple teeth, whether they've been broken, that someone sent them back to me, or whatever happened. What I do is I pull out as much as I can, and then I come in with my Dremel and that tungsten bit and just carve it out. It takes me a little bit longer. I went kind of fast on that one, but I'm as careful as I can so that I don't have to sand as much. One thing that happened here is I went to oil it, and I was out of my tongue oil, so I use tongue oil. And I went to go get some more from the store, and the regular brand that I use is gone. They just stopped carrying it. So I grabbed this one, and I was a little bit nervous just because I wasn't sure how it was going to oil the piece. I mean, it's really just an oil, still just tongue oil. It should theoretically be the same. One thing I noticed immediately was that it was a lot thinner. So the other tongue oil I had was a lot more viscous. So the thinner oil actually should help it penetrate a little bit better, which theoretically will give it a better seal. But at the same time, I wasn't quite sure. I could smell a little bit more fumes coming off of it, so it definitely had a little bit more, I don't know, alcohol content or or menthol, just a little bit. Obviously, it was a different mix, slightly different mix. What I'm doing here is I noticed just a deep scratch, so I wanted to sand that off before I finished oiling this. It actually worked great. So I ended up loving the low viscosity of the tongue oil. It applied really clean. It brought out the grain beautifully. I was really pleased with it. So I'm really happy with that, the new tongue oil. I'll definitely continue to use that. What I would have done otherwise if I didn't like it is I would have just ordered some others. Once I got that oiled up, the last step here is just to lash it. Lashing usually takes the longest and it's the most boring. So I'm just doing a triangle lash here on the bull shark teeth. So those are bull shark on the handle and then tiger shark teeth on the bill. The tiger shark teeth, I did a double triangle there, so it creates like a diamond shape. On the bull shark, it's just a single triangle. And this is a pretty standard lashing that I use for lashing these marlin bills, as well as putting in the bull shark. It accented really well. I probably would have put the teeth a little further towards the tip on a different piece, but because they were wanting this sword to be similar to a previous sword that I'd done, I brought the teeth down a little bit further just to match that design layout. But it ended up looking really nice. I was actually very pleased with it. The biggest pain was lashing in the bill to the handle. This just took a while. So I'm doing a cross lash, and then I'm going back over and doing a top to bottom lash there that's just gonna kind of hold the cross part of it together. The structural hold for this piece is really just in how I mounted the bill. The lashing will help hold it a little bit, but the primary hold for this one is actually how I mounted it. So the bill is inset into the handle, almost like a hidden, or not almost, but exactly like a hidden thing. The only difference between this piece and the other piece is I didn't actually peg this one. My other sword that I made, I pegged, but that's just because I had a larger bill, so I was able to peg it a little better. So here's the final piece. I was really pleased with it. The wood was absolutely beautiful, just amazing curl. The marlin bill was a pretty straight bill, so that turned out really nice as well. The handle's a little bit large, but weight-wise, it's almost a perfect balance. And so overall, I was very pleased with it. I liked the accent between the bill and the wood and the teeth. Had a good contrast. It's really awesome. And of course, definitely had to get to testing it. So here is one of my favorite parts, also some of the most nerve-wracking parts. I wasn't sure how to test this one. I decided to test it just like a, I don't know, I'm not sure what type of spear, a pike. Anyway, just stabbing it in. But it stabbed just straight in. I think I stabbed it 2 or 3 times. Man, it just went right into the ballistics gel. This stab here, you can't really see it, but it actually cut into the back end. So I have a guest appearance. That's just my son having fun. Actually, no, the actual guest appearance is Colin here. He's my stepdad. My mom and stepdad were visiting from Hawaii, and he wanted to give a swing at the ballistics gel, and so I grabbed this piece for him to test with. It's one of my favorite pieces. He actually is trained in various martial arts as well as stunt work, so he's a stuntman. And he just had an absolute blast testing on this, and the hits cut in just unbelievably deep. You can't really, it's hard to see it from the video in the slow motion, but oh, it just cuts right in. He really enjoyed that, and that was a lot of fun to watch. I hope you enjoyed it. This piece was a lot of fun. That ends this series. See you next time.